This is a Sandler training audiobook produced and distributed by Gildan Media, a division of Recorded Books, in partnership with Sandler Training. Patient Care the Sandler Way, running a great medical practice that has patients cheering and staff engaged, by Donna Bak, narrated by Janet Metzger. We hope you enjoy this program. Note, because the English language lacks a generic singular pronoun that indicates both genders, we have used the masculine pronouns for the sake of style, readability, and brevity. This material applies to both men and women. Forward. It's hard to think of a segment of the economy that has had to deal with more turbulence, public scrutiny, and controversy in recent years than the healthcare sector. Yet even with all the media coverage, all the drama, and all the high-profile disagreements, one persistent reality has consistently remained under-examined. Patients expect a better level of service, and many of them are ready, willing, and able to change providers if doing so means receiving a better in-person experience. Here's the good news. Healthcare professionals have more control than they may imagine over the quality of both the patient experience and, by extension, over their own level of satisfaction in the workplace. Donna Bak's new book shows how to reclaim this control. It leverages classic Sandler selling system communication principles and adapts them to the healthcare environment, allowing professionals to transform the dynamic of their interactions with patients and with each other. Patient Care the Sandler Way is a long overdue contribution to the essential, ongoing conversation about improving both the quality and the sustainability of the healthcare experience. David Mattson, President, CEO, Sandler Training. Introduction. The Big Question. The greater danger for most of us lies not in setting our aim too high and falling short, but in setting our aim too low and achieving our mark. Michelangelo. Is your practice a great practice? Great medical practices look and sound different than their competition. Sure, profitability contributes to greatness, as does superior medical expertise, but these are not enough. Great medical practices also put a high priority on delivering an extraordinary experience for both their patients and their internal staff. In doing so, they are better positioned to withstand the pressures and demands that naturally occur in the medical field. They are less vulnerable to external forces and stronger internally. Healthcare professionals at great medical practices experience less stress on the job and treat each other with more respect. Inevitably, a question arises for every medical practice. Are we good or are we great? A good medical practice focuses on production levels in the hopes of making a profit. If enough patients come through the practice in a day, the theory goes, the practice will be profitable. Along the way, though, there are a lot of challenges. Complex payment processes, government regulations, hassles with insurance companies, the need to see more and more patients, high staff turnover, difficult people and situations, and last but not least, a deepening sense that the patient experience is not what it should be. A great medical practice faces all of the same challenges, except for the last one. It manages to transcend the challenges by focusing on profitability, medical expertise, and creating a positive experience. This experience is so positive that patients can't stop talking about it. Patients talk to friends, relatives, and acquaintances about the care they received. They can't help posting nice things about this great practice on social media. They can't imagine recommending anyone else. As you can see, this model is a little different than that of the merely good medical practice. If enough patients come through the practice in a day, stay with the practice year after year, and rave about their positive experience to their family and friends, the practice will grow in patients and health scores will rise. There's more. In a great medical practice, healthcare professionals treat each other as equal peers, and they treat each other with respect. They elevate themselves to perform at a higher level. They don't want to work anywhere else. Does your practice put a high priority on creating an experience that leaves patients thinking, "Wow"? Is customer care an ongoing conversation, not a one-time event? Do you have a work environment in which colleagues treat each other as internal customers? Or is profitability and medical expertise the only focus of your day? The Sandler Patient Care Training Approach. This book will give you a detailed overview of Sandler's approach to patient care training. This approach has been implemented successfully by medical practices in a variety of disciplines. Each of these practices has taken team performance to the next level. Healthcare professionals are given the opportunity to master the inner game that creates and sustains a respectful, productive, low-stress environment for both patients and staff. In Sandler's patient care training approach, healthcare professionals learn how to develop proven skills to deliver an exceptional experience that leaves patients and peers smiling, how to approach their job with positive attitudes and productive behaviors that transform the way they think about themselves, their peers, and their patients. Sandler training provides long-term and incremental reinforcement training and coaching to ensure a significant, lasting return on the training investment. We not only help your medical practice bridge the gap between where you are today and where you want to be in the future, but we get you there sooner. This book is only the beginning. Read it, and then let's continue the discussion. How good is your slingshot? Chapter 1. The Beginning. Never look back unless you are planning to go that way. Henry David Thoreau. My client, Dr. George Upward, not his real name, realized he was playing David to someone else's Goliath on a chilly Monday morning when he accidentally left the dining room window open. George, a general practitioner doctor, was serving as CEO of Upward Medicine, a multi-office practice in Oregon City, Oregon. He liked to come downstairs at home to read the morning paper before starting his day. George was a traditionalist who read the local paper in print form, turning physical pages of newsprint while he sipped his coffee. As he consulted the Oregon City Eagle, though, his blood ran cold. Even when he got up and shut the window, the cold feeling inside wouldn't leave him alone. There, on the back page of the first section, was a full-page ad for his competitor, Major Care West, touting the high quality of their patient care. Of course, the big hospitals and specialized care centers had huge media campaigns behind them, campaigns that dominated social media discussions. George knew his practice couldn't afford that. He didn't plan to compete that way. But what on earth was one of his own patients, or, come to think of it, a former patient, doing in Major Care West's ad giving such a glowing recommendation? George grumbled and flung the paper onto the table. He took a long pull of black coffee, then set the cup down. Joanne, not her real name either, had been a patient of his some time ago. George's day had gotten off to a bad start. He picked up the latest issue of Oregon Medicine, the trade magazine to which he subscribed, and started flipping through the pages to get his mind off the ad he'd just seen. But the very same ad with the same endorsement showed up on page 5. "I give up," he said, louder than he'd meant to. "I cannot believe this." "Give up on what?" called his wife Marie from upstairs. "Nothing." She apparently believed him, Honey, I have an appointment at Northwest Chiropractic at 9. Can you drop me there on your way to work? I have a friend picking me up when I'm done. I suppose. You suppose? Yes, I can. Yes. Okay, thanks. What mystified George was how other practices in Oregon City, chiropractors, dentists, pediatricians, somehow rang up all those love letters. Take Northwest Chiropractic, for instance. Just last night, some of its patients had posted a wave of positive messages on Northwest's Facebook page. George pulled up the page on his phone and read it once again. As he did, he shook his head. The people at Northwest are the best. They treat you like a human being. Cannot recommend them highly enough. My mother-in-law recommended this chiropractic office to me. So glad she did. Wonderful place. Check them out. It's like my whole life turned around after the folks at Northwest got to work on my back. Pains I had been used to living with for years disappeared literally overnight. Go see these people. What is up with these posts? George thought. Are they for real? Or does Northwest have an army of paid endorsers posting away online or something? Wait a minute. George squinted at the ad and got a real jolt. That last one was from his wife, Marie. What is going on here? George had been worrying for weeks that his practice might be vulnerable to a merger with a competitor, and those splashy full-page ads hadn't done anything to calm his fears. He knew he wouldn't be able to compete against a combination of profitability and exceptional care. As his practice's patient flow slowed down and patient turnover increased, he was already under a lot of pressure. The last thing he wanted to do was to be acquired by another practice. As he drove Marie to her appointment, he started thinking about what it would be like to work for Major Care West. He didn't like that option much, the shame of defeat, the loss of autonomy, the frustration of not having a seat at the decision-making table. You missed the exit, George. Sorry, dear. Chapter 2. The Competitive Challenge in Healthcare. I tell the kids, somebody's got to win and somebody's got to lose. Just don't fight about it. Just try to get better. Yogi Berra. My client George is not alone. Leaders in the healthcare profession come to Sandler for different reasons, but they usually share with us one or more of these concerns. They are unsure of how to keep a productive flow of patients coming through the practice without hurting the patient experience and ultimately compromising the practice's future. They feel pressured by patient demands for better service. Patients know they have choices. Staff is losing motivation. A players are leaving. Doing nothing about it is not an option anymore. They struggle with sounding different from their competition, leaving them with no point of difference and vulnerable to mergers and acquisitions. There are often other concerns as well: stagnant or shrinking market share, flat growth, changes in reimbursement models, increases in malpractice insurance, and a dwindling flow of new patients. Issues like these have always been threats to the success of a medical practice. But the inability to compete against the larger medical practices or hospitals, the Goliaths in healthcare, is new for many practices, and some are better at this than others. David and Goliath, the healthcare version. The story of David and Goliath tells of the young shepherd boy David who volunteers to fight the giant Goliath. Goliath is armed with a massive club at the end of his tree-trunk-sized arm. Knowing that he can't possibly compete against Goliath's strength, David chooses instead to use his skill with a slingshot. In the story, he defeats the formidable Goliath with a single well-aimed stone. So the question for you and your practice is, how good is your slingshot? Offering your patients the best medical technology and medical expertise isn't enough anymore. For medical practices to thrive in today's competitive market, they need a slingshot, a point of difference to win and to keep winning. That point of distinction isn't a new piece of equipment, or a new alliance with another practice, or a spiffy new marketing campaign. There is nothing wrong with any of those things in and of themselves. They're just not a slingshot. In order to survive and compete successfully in today's market, you must deliver a wow patient experience that turns patients into what authors Ken Blanchard and Sheldon Bowles call raving fans. In fact, Raving Fans is the title of their book. Raving fans are not the same as satisfied patients. Satisfied patients are the ones who tell you after a visit that they were generally happy with the level of care they received. Raving fans, on the other hand, would go out of their way to choose you again over a competitor, would not replace you with a competitor under any circumstances, and would enthusiastically recommend you to friends and family who are foolish enough to think of going elsewhere. Most medical practices do not have raving fans. If they're lucky, they have satisfied patients. Not many, truth be told, are even that lucky. How do you build a practice that generates such responses from patients? How, in other words, do you build a slingshot? Chapter 3. Why Conventional Approaches Don't Work. Life begins at the end of your comfort zone. Neil Donald Walsh. If you were to ask George from Chapter 1 whether he'd trained his team well enough to generate raving fan responses, he would have replied, "Of course I have. We've spent a lot of time training our people in patient care." He'd have been correct, at least about that last part. George has indeed invested time, effort, and energy in various patient care training regimens. The trouble is the typical customer or patient care training simply doesn't work in health care. George was skeptical about this when he first came to Sandler for help. He thought of patient care training for his staff as something you checked off a list, preferably over the course of an hour or so, but if necessary over the course of a weekend. Then you didn't bother with it again, ever, until you had a new hire. But a big part of George's skepticism lay in his misunderstanding of what patient care training really is. What holds people back? Conventional patient care training typically doesn't address how to keep employees from drifting back to their old behavior, the tasks and behaviors they're most familiar with, their comfort zone, once the training is over. In every job, there are tasks and behaviors that employees are good at, comfortable with, and enjoy doing. These are the tasks that are always at the top of their to-do list. The tasks and behaviors that come to them naturally are right within their comfort zone. There are also tasks and behaviors in the job that make employees uncomfortable, which they avoid by rationalizing why they can't do them. These are the tasks that often are left over on a to-do list at the end of the day. They are the tasks and behaviors employees shy away from, not because they can't do them, but because they're not comfortable doing them. These tasks and behaviors and habits are outside their comfort zone. There's nothing out of the ordinary about having a comfort zone, and there's nothing bad about not feeling like stepping out of it. That's the human condition. Yes, it's a little scary when people must take on a new behavior that lies outside of what they're familiar with doing. But the fact that it's a little scary doesn't mean they shouldn't do it. Wasn't it a little scary when you learned to ride a bike? Wasn't it a little scary the first time you tried to parallel park? Wasn't it a little scary when you paid the rent or mortgage on your own place for the very first time? Wasn't it a little scary the first time you drew blood from a patient or gave someone an injection? Yet imagine a world where you never learned to ride a two-wheeler, where you were doomed to search the city forever for a head-in parking place, where you never set up house on your own, where you were never able to give a patient who needed one an injection. David Sandler, the founder of Sandler Training, used to say that in the situations that really matter, You only have to be brave for 5 seconds at a time. He was absolutely right. Human beings are wired to be able to challenge their own comfort zones and grow as a result of that challenge. Humans wouldn't have survived as a species otherwise. Sometimes individuals can lose sight of that, but it's true. You're actually happier and more fulfilled when you're growing and challenging yourself. You can probably think of a few things in your job right now that make you feel nervous, embarrassed, self-conscious, anxious, or maybe even inadequate. Maybe it's addressing conflict, or doing something for the first time, or speaking in front of a group, or selling your services, or taking a stand on something when it goes against the majority, or advocating for yourself, or failing, and on and on. Healthcare professionals, including doctors, often feel uncomfortable bringing up any time-related issues with patients. For example, the doctor is running late, there are no available appointments for several weeks, the doctor, usually for valid reasons, has to rush through appointments, or the patient may not get a call back about a question within 24 hours. Dealing effectively with time, too much or too little of it, is outside the comfort zone of many healthcare professionals. If you're like most people, you will look hard for and usually find all kinds of creative ways to avoid doing things outside your comfort zone. But consider this. What if you were able to get beyond your discomfort and perform these uncomfortable tasks or behaviors for just long enough to create a breakthrough? Would you overcome a fear that you know is holding you back, both personally and professionally? Let's pretend for a minute that you could overcome this fear. Would you have a better quality of work? Heck, a better quality of life? How did you learn to ride a bike? Training that doesn't push you beyond your comfort zone, training without reinforcement over time, won't work. Not when it comes to creating sustainable, productive new behavior patterns. Once upon a time, you didn't know how to ride a bicycle. Now, I'm guessing you do. How did that happen? It was easy enough not to ride a bike. In fact, you were pretty good at not riding a bike. Then you saw the kids around the neighborhood riding around on their bikes. It seemed like something you ought to be doing. You got some coaching from a friend, parent, or sibling. The first time you tried to pedal without training wheels was a little scary. Your coach helped you through that. You took a deep breath. You pedaled anyway. You fell down. You got back up. Your coach talked you through it. You fell down. You got back up. Your coach talked you through it. You repeated that process. It didn't happen overnight. But thanks to ongoing reinforcement, it did happen. At first, riding without your training wheels was well outside your comfort zone, right? Then at some point you moved to a point where riding a bike was inside your comfort zone. Maybe then one of the kids you played with started popping wheelies and you had something new to expand your comfort zone around, after listening to a boring lecture from your parents about bike safety, of course. This experience of learning something new by expanding your comfort zone is universal, which is why we talk about it as much as we do in all of Sandler's training programs. We emphasize it because it is the secret sauce that leads to personal and organizational success in just about any field of endeavor, including patient care. I realize you may have heard something like this before. There is a secret sauce for most everything in life, from losing weight to finding love to attracting and keeping patients and everything in between. Lots of books promise to tell you how to accomplish these kinds of things, and lots of experts claim to have the ingredients to the secret sauce that will enable you to have a breakthrough in their chosen area of expertise. Although most of the sauces people write books about should work, the truth is they don't. Why not? Because they don't provide a strategy for overcoming the discomfort inherent in doing new behaviors that will take you outside your comfort zone. That's what George's previous training programs didn't have, a strategy for overcoming the natural inclination to stick with the familiar that most adults develop by the time they are about 30 years old. Adult learners do best with a regimen of ongoing reinforcement with trainer and peer support over time. The Sandler approach uses that regimen to challenge you to feel the discomfort, do it anyway, and notice what happens. This is what George didn't take into account. It doesn't matter how good the patient care curriculum is or how good the trainers are in delivering the material. It's the shift from comfortable to uncomfortable, from mediocre to exceptional, that's at the heart of the Sandler training approach. This is why our clients get a strong, rapid return on their training. In other words, you can't teach someone to ride a bike by showing him a video of a bike-riding kid. He has to be hands-on, and you've got to coach. A medical practice will not get a return on its training investment unless the people are being trained to move outside their comfort zone and perform at a higher level. Moving beyond the familiar. George, the CEO, was used to getting through his day in a certain way. He had built up a certain momentum, a certain force of habit when it came to dealing with questions related to the patient experience. Complaints from patients? Bad reviews online? His solution was to point people toward those posters they handed out during customer care training. That's what lay inside George's comfort zone. It wasn't getting him or his practice where he wanted to go. Not only that, the doctors in his practice were also used to getting through their day in a certain way. They, too, had grown accustomed to how the staff interacted with patients and with each other. If they were truthful with themselves, they'd agree that the patient care was usually mediocre and the staff interactions were good, not great. They would say things like, "It's a problem of commitment," or "The staff members aren't doing their job," or "It will pass." No matter how often they repeated those mantras, though, the communication problems didn't seem to go away. To the contrary, they seemed to be getting worse. In fact, everyone in George's medical practice, all the people who worked with the patients, were used to doing things in a certain way, too. They'd say things like, "No one understands how hard we work," or "I just smile, do what I'm told, and get through the day," or "Why all this fuss over patient care when we're so busy?" These mantras, too, didn't seem to be improving the situation. Every employee of a practice lives in a world in which everything they do and say connects with what the customer experiences. That means, instead of repeating mantras or stories, they need to change their perspective and ask some new and braver questions. Where the magic happens. In order for any sustainable, positive change to occur at Upward Medicine, in order to move the patient experience from about what you'd expect to, "I have got to tell people what a great practice this is," George, like each and every member of the team, had to answer this question: why should I bother going outside my comfort zone? Seriously, why bother with behavioral change? Why bother with reinforcement? Why bother disrupting mediocrity? Different people within the practice are going to have different answers to that question. For executives like George, the answer to the question, "Why should I do something different?" lay in the increasingly competitive healthcare marketplace itself. He didn't want his practice to be merged or acquired by a larger competitor. Years ago, George had made a conscious choice not to go work for a hospital. He would have had fewer day-to-day worries if he'd made the decision the other way because, let's face it, a hospital takes care of everything. He could have shown up for work each day and just practiced medicine, letting the hospital executives handle all the decisions about what building to use, how to pay for it, what equipment to secure, how to pay for that, who to hire, who to fire, how to retain key staff, when and how to expand the practice, and so on. But that's not what George wanted. He had more of an entrepreneurial spirit. He wanted to chart his own destiny. Self-determination was a big issue for him. He wanted to maintain control of the practice and grow it over time.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?